Hello, my name is Andrew Brady.
Sam Shaw.
Max Apino.
And this is our Dracula Discussion video.
How do the Gothic conventions take form within the novel? Which conventions does Stroker use? Where can they be found? How do they apply in the context of the novel? So what is the first Gothic convention that you see?
The first Gothic convention I see is really the most obvious Gothic convention. It's the convention of making things bleak, scenery. When you look at Dracula's castle, their broken battlements, that's perhaps the most obvious scene, and his castle's scary, intimidating, and it provides kind of an eerie place for the story to take place. Although what I did find also was in the imagery he uses, he actually kind of foreshadows the bleakness to come as well. In one passage on page 11, when Jonathan Harker is traveling to Dracula's castle, Stoker describes the landscape as in and out amongst these green hills of what they call here the Mittelland ran the road, losing itself as it swept round the grassy curve or was shut out by the straggling ends of pine woods, where here and there ran down the hillsides like tongues of flame. Now, it's basically describing the nature of the scene while he's traveling to Dracula's castle, and foreshadows it because it says tongues of flame. It foreshadows the devil to come. So it's a good use of imagery.
I found the Gothic convention the air of mystery, because you don't really know like who Dracula is, and you don't actually see him a lot in the novel. You see him a few times, and you know that he's this evil figure, but you don't know how or what he does or anything that pertains to him. Did you see any?
I definitely saw darkness from Jonathan Harker arriving at the castle, at the Bleak Castle, as Andrew Brady talked about, to Dracula's Black Cave. Also, when Van Helsing's group comes in to Carfax to look for the boxes, the 21 boxes, it's dark and there's no light, and this kind of gives an air of mystery, of darkness. They don't really know what they're searching for. It's almost ignorance as well. And so when Dracula appears out of the darkness and he surprises them, that darkness kind of just embodies their surprise and their
it's like suspense, right?
Suspense. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes.
All right.
Appropriate convention.
Any more?
Oh, very good.
Okay. What effect does Stroker produce by structuring the novel through diary entries and letters? Why would he choose to tell the story through this way? How does this technique affect the story? I think he gives like a role to each character by doing this, and like somebody that we can trust. If we know if we get Dracula's point of view, then we don't quite trust Dracula because he is the villain. But if we get from these characters that we trust, that we know, that we kind of learn about throughout the story, we understand their story better, and we see it through their eyes as they went through this.
And their personalities definitely shine through.
Right.
That different perspective gives us different opinions, sheds new light on each one, and even though there are some objective facts in the novel, the subjective opinion and the subjective play is probably the most interesting part of the novel in itself.
I agree. I mean, it definitely the epistolary technique that he uses to write the story in letters definitely plays a large role in characterizing some of the characters. I think also you go back to that idea of verisimilitude, and it's making things seem like they're real, and then you have I think there's a reason why he also adds a lot of facts to kind of justify why things happen legally, why they can't tell people, and it makes things seem real. It makes things seem scary because it's all more inescapable. And I think adding letters from different characters, and they're all kind of saying the same thing, they're all conveying the same story, really shows the realness of the situation, and it makes things seem like it's reality.
It kind of gives a sense of humanity within this Gothic genre.
Yeah.
All right. How does Dracula's story invert Christian mythology and tradition? Where does Stoker reference Christian traditions? What significance do the inversions have in the story? So I think one of the major ones is the breaking of the wafer, the host, and he makes the circle with the host, and he puts it in all the tombs, and he used the host a lot to repent the evil, and I think that also kind of shows the host's holiness, but also kind of breaks down Christian traditions.
Also, and I think it was chapter 16 or 17, when Van Helsing's group goes into the graveyard and they find Lucy's grave. There's no one there. She was there, but there's no one there. And she appears later on in full human form, or later the undead vampire form. So that's kind of reminiscent of Jesus's rising from the tomb, rising, and then he kind of comes back in the whole image, and he shows himself to the disciples again. So that's kind of a good connection.
That's a connection to make. One thing that I'd like to actually do, I'd like to use this as a segue to move into another question, and I can address this question as well. It says, how does he invert Christian mythology and traditions? Another question we have is, what is the role of good and evil in play? What I think one of the large themes is that Dracula is inside a cathedral. That's where he sleeps in his coffins. It's always cathedrals he's sleeping in. The thing is, it seems weird, right? Because that's a holy place that he's living. He's the embodiment of evil. What I think the cool thing is with Christian tradition, and definitely with the wafers, is just as he invades the hallowed area of the church, and he needs to be driven out by the holiness of the church, by the wafers, that's what destroys him, the crosses, right? He comes into this group of friends, this group of protagonists that writes the letters, and they're a group of good people. They're good. They embody good. So just as he comes into their relationship, they have to use the good within their relationship, trust in the forefront to repel Dracula.
Completely valid.
How does sexuality play a role in Dracula? What can you infer from the novel about sexuality in Victorian times? Where in the novel do these instances occur?
So at the beginning of the story, the three vampire ladies, they're kind of the opposite of Victorian motherly tradition at the time. The woman was seen as a matronly figure. She was inside the house. She was conservative. She was taking care of the kids, of the children, and in general the family. So when you see this really forthright, vampire-ish, vampire and really violent sense of women taking advantage of Harker, it's almost a gender shift role that really hasn't been seen before in that type of culture. And so I think it's interesting, the juxtaposition between that Victorian culture and Dracula's environment in Transylvania.
Also Lucy, when she's first innocent and pure, and she get married, and then all of a sudden Dracula comes and bites her, and she turns into this undead person. And when she returns to see her husband, she is kind of like lustful towards him, and like asks him to come and kiss her, and very sexual about it. And it also shows this kind of change from innocent to sexual, and how she was innocent, being Victorian in that time, motherly, but now she's kind of the opposite of that. She's become this undead, sexual person.
I actually completely agree with that. I think that it is that complete shift from purity to what's horrid, and what's horrid is Victorian culture. What you have is like I said, a girl like Lucy who's getting ready to be married, and you turn into someone that you're completely not. And I think that shows it shows in opinion on sexuality, that too much sexuality, that completely unrestrained sexuality in that culture is detestable. It's almost seen as when you go back to Jonathan Harker, when he sees the three women in Dracula's castle, they try to seduce him, and they're evil. I mean, it's almost saying if you are like this sexually, this is how immoral you are. You're as immoral as a vampire. So I think it's very strong.
I also think it's really interesting and radical of Bram Stoker to talk about, to bring this sense of sexuality, this radical sense of spiritual sexuality into this context. Before, when this was certainly not time, it was kind of a conservative era. So I thought that was really interesting. Stoker, very modern, very contemporary.
It would shock the readers. Right?
Yes, that's exactly.
All right. What roles do Mina and Lucy play in the story? Compare the two women. How are they similar? How are they different? How do they keep the story going? Why are they the only characters who get bitten by Dracula? And I think the last question goes back to sexuality, and like Dracula is, in all the vampires, are sexual beings, and he comes on the women and not the men because of this sexual content that Stoker provides to the story.
I don't have much on this, Brady.
I think part of it, this is a characterization of Dracula as not only a sexual being, but as someone that's testable, someone that's morally. He's not targeting the men, he's always targeting women. And the women always tend to be these pure, innocent people, like Max said, and like we've all said. He always seems to attack with, he's surreptitious about it, he's deceptive. He attacks the most vulnerable member of the group.
The weakest people.
The weakest people. And women in this culture are seen as weak, innocent people, going back to like what you said.
And Lucy is really that type. Yeah. Well, especially because since she's so sensual and she has that susceptibility.
Right, and she becomes a vampire a lot quicker than Mina does, and I think that's because she's a lot weaker than Mina is. And Mina, she goes on this trip with Van Helsing at the end of the book, and she's slowly becoming a vampire, but she doesn't outright become a vampire. She's strong in her position, and her soul keeps safe rather than...
So Lucy succumbs to Dracula's curse, or his likelihood easier than mine.
Right.
Yeah, I think in terms of difference between Mina and Lucy, I actually think there's a big difference, although they're both supposed to be pure, good, vulnerable figures. Lucy is so much more absorbed in herself, absorbed in her own marriage, and then I think that's part of why she may succumb earlier. She is not the stalwart moral figure that Mina is. Mina, on the other hand, she embodies tenderness. One of the most memorable parts of the story is when I think it's when Jonathan Harker or Arthur Homewood is crying, and she comes up and she basically just completely comforts him, cares for him, and she's a figure that kind of bonds the group together in their role.
I think it was also very, very strong of Mina to tell Van Helsing's group, kill me if I become that type of vampire that Lucy was, because I don't want to hurt you or destroy you or hurt the children, as Lucy has done and I observed.
Exactly. I mean, so much more awareness.
And it's a good moral compass.
All right. I think that's it.
That's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.